Welcome everybody to today's webinar. Today we'll be looking at two of the systems that are part of the standard donor management system, the trust system and Bequest. I'll be handling Bequest, doing that first, and then Murray Neal will be doing the trust system. And this is continuing in our series of trying to cover all the different features of Donman and the various modules so that you can at any point later on refresh yourself on the use of them. So, getting started on Bequest, the Donman Bequest system allows you to record, track and report on bequests you hope for and bequests you have been promised. It's a standard part of the Donman system, so everybody that's got Donman has the Bequest system. The process of tracking a bequest starts with classifying the potential giver into the stage of the process they are up to, from the initial content to the hoped-for final bequest that will be made. You need to create a set of codes to represent your own organisation's tracking process. You may also want to create a set of codes for solicitors that may be used in the bequest record, so if a particular solicitor is administering bequests. There is also another code for, there's a couple other codes there that are also involved in bequests. So basically, we're looking at a process, and I've got some examples of codes here that you might use, but you can create your own. So my suggested codes here are information's requested. Somebody has rung us, contacted us, and said, yes, I'd like some information on a bequest. So that's an example of a code of a bequest process, a progress. And then another one might be seeing, but not sure of interest. And the next one might be, yes, they're looking into it, and they're actually interested. They've expressed an interest. Another step in the process might be the bequest is promised. Now, this is just a verbal idea that somebody said, look, yes, I'm intending to give you a bequest. You don't know how much. You can't actually confirm it. And then the next step along is amount known, where they've actually told you, look, I'm going to leave you $50,000 or $100,000 or 10% of my estate. And another possible step in the process is confirmed. Now, confirmed, I'm guessing, would be only if you've actually seen some documentation of the bequest, that you've seen an actual will or a lawyer's letter. Probably not so much a will, it's more likely to be a letter from a solicitor or somebody confirming the bequest. And then finally, bequest received, and I guess that's the full cycle. Setting up these codes is pretty simple, and I'm just going to go into Donman. If I can. Oops. Hang on. Just go into it again. Sorry. Just too big for the size of the screen. Okay, so if we go into the donor screen, oh sorry, not the donor screen. If we go into the Donman menu and we go to fundraising and the bequest system. Now, the bequest system can actually be used for top donors too, but there's only one field specific to top donors, which is the top donor, yes, no, here. But if we go into this field, there is bequest codes. So under bequest codes, we can set these various processes. And here's the example I've given you, that seeing interested, verbal, visit one, confirmed, information requested. So this is where you can set up whatever codes you will use in the system. Back to my the bequest record itself is just an add-on to the donor screen. So that basically you've got to have a donor record, and this is the same for almost everything in Donman, whether it's bequest, trust, pledge, function, anything at all. You start with the donor screen and then you add something to it. Sometimes those things you add are like donations, where there can be many things for the one donor. In the case of a bequest record, there will only ever be the one record, which is the bequest record. So you have to have a donor record to create a bequest record. So if we look at the donor screen now and we look at a donor, I can see by the highlights on my screen this person has a bequest record. I click on the bequest record, and let me take you through the items. Now, the first half of the screen is the name and address that's just taken from your donor screen, and the middle bit is the summary history. So with a bequest prospect, it's always good to know roughly what that person has given you, how many times. So that's why we include the summary of the donor's history on that first bequest screen. So I can see this person's given $8,900 as their highest donation, their total is $29,000. So they're probably a very good bequest prospect. Now, as I say, you can record some of the top donor and put their secretary's name, but today I'm only focusing on bequest. So are they a bequest prospect, yes or no? I'm not sure why you'd ever say no, but yes, they are. Bequest code, and I've said verbal. They've told the bequest will be made, but no data. And again, I have all my various progress codes for my bequest. And later on, I can report on those codes. Date registered. When did we first create this record and put them on file? Date brochure requested, assuming at some point the person asked for information. And that's when we first sent them. Is it a valid bequest prospect? I suppose you'd only say no if after all that you looked at them and realised that perhaps they didn't have any money. I'm not sure why they would ever do that in that case, or why you have them on the system, but yes, we have a valid option there. On the next screen, now I'm going to screen 2, but I will still point out that on the bottom of this bequest screen, there are these numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, which will let you jump from screen to screen. So you can in fact jump from screen to screen without entering through, but because I'm showing you what's on the bequest screen, I'm going to go through it all. So the bequest confirmed date would only be there if the bequest has been confirmed. So I've got a bequest confirmed date and details money, or whatever it is. Date amount known, only again if they've told you how much, and I've said $500,000. If there was no amount known, but you had an estimated amount, you could put that in there instead. Sometimes people leave insurance to you, and if that's the case, or investment. So if that's the case, you can put a yes there in either of those fields and into the details here. Birthday, date of birth, which again should be the same as the donor one, I assume, if it's the donor record. Marital status, spouse's name, and these are all text fields. Pets, interests, clubs, contact with relatives. Contact with relatives may be important in terms of knowing the family structure and how many people are likely to share in the will and what your options are. I've heard interesting things said with bequest prospecting. Some people try and get a fixed bequest amount and some ask for a percentage of the estate. Once heard a bequest person say that a percentage of the estate was better because it would go up. Best time for visiting, if you have any information on that. And then we have an ability to enter information about their children. So I can have up to 6 children's name in here, date of birth and sex. And then, of course, you have the notepad here, which is part of Donman. And from the donor record, you can easily access the notepad. But if there's something that you want to never appear in the notes, you simply just want to be part of the bequest record, which maybe not everyone has access to, you can enter this here in the bequest comment field. Now, the solicitor codes I mentioned you can also set up. If there is a solicitor involved in the bequest, you can create a code, and in the case of the code here, Galbally or TTC, basically you can create multiple records with a name and address of who the solicitor is that's involved and associate them. Okay, so then on the last screen, we have the first visit, last visit, second last visit, and last visit. So we've got a visit history and who made the visits and roughly what it's about, and a figure for the total number of visits. Now these visits will actually be created and updated on the contact history as well. So contact history is made up of manual contacts, mail-outs you've done with appeals, and also bequest visits. So we have a record here of a next visit planned, and we have the option of adding a new visit date. So if I say yes, I'm going to add a new visit date, it was today by me, and it was follow-up on discussion from last week. And I can say yes to update it. Now the information here, we've got an option of yes, no, or reversal. So yes means add it, No means don't do it, R means reversal. So I could take out one of these visits. So if I'd entered 20th the 8th, 2013, I could reverse and I would remove that visit from the history. And then I have next visit planned, which I'll say is T plus 14. And I've added that, and that will be part of my history now. So that's the basis of adding a bequest record. So we've created a donor record and we've added a bequest code. Now, as far as the donor record goes, what donor type would you give? I mean, the donor type is still an individual. The fact that they have a bequest record doesn't necessarily change that. You may want to create an extra code to indicate the person has a bequest prospect, but on the donor screen, there is an option to say bequest prospect, yes or no. So you do know it. If you want a more dramatic reminder that a person is a bequest prospect, I guess it is possible. You could create a special code to say they're an individual and a bequest prospect, but I would probably go with an extra code. Generally, you'll use the diary report for bequest, and this is on reporting on bequests. So it is possible to report on your bequest, and you can also use a visual reporter to extract data or report. But what I'm going to do is show you about using the report writer, using a diary report. So on the actual bequest screen, we have bequest file report. And the bequest file report is also known as the diary report in Donman, because it actually lets you report on general donors, bequest prospects, trusts, and volunteers. So today we are looking at bequests, so I'm going to click into the button for report on bequests, and that's all I'm going to do. So when I go into that report, the first thing it'll ask me is it pops up a screen which is specific for the bequest selection. Now if I reported on trusts or volunteers or general donors, I would get a different pop-up box. So basically report on visit review date, so I can report on a visit date that I'm going to, when I'm due to meet people. I can report on bequest prospects, they must be. I can select by particular bequest codes. I select a postcode range, a visit by a particular staff member, bequest donor number range. Now I think you can see that probably the benefit of this is if I'm a bequest person and I have a particular region of the country that I visit and particular people I visit, I can enter my name, put in a postcode range and get a list of the people I'm due to visit, and then I have that little list with me that I can use as a guide to go and see them. So I'm just going to leave that blank now, but I'm going to leave that go. Now, once I've decided my criteria, who I want to be there, I then have choices of what I want on the report. And some of those choices will be unavailable, like trust details and trust application or volunteer, because I'm only doing a bequest report. But I could say I want the full donor screen, the summary donation history. Do I want to print the full donation history or just the last 10 or no donation history? So I'll say full, print appointments, functions invited, attended, so I know what functions they've been to, bequest file data, and again, I can only select that if I'm doing the bequest report. I can print their notepads as well. And I have some other options like starting each donor on a new page. I can print from a selection file. I can create a selection file. So I'm going to say next and go to print preview. And for every person that I'm due, that's a bequest prospect that I want to visit, I have their full donor and donation information, every donation that they've given, the notes from their notepad, the bequest information that I've recorded against them, and I can use that as a guide when I go visiting. And again, I could have narrowed that down and done less. But that's just a quick overview of how to get information out of the bequest system. Again, I can use the diary report. Now, the last thing I just want to touch on, as I said, the bequest system is part of Donman and it's free. If you're an organisation that has people that visit and go out in the field and maybe stay for a couple of days, you have an issue of how do you update the bequest system and the Donman system. Now, there's two ways you can do that. One way is log on using remote access and directly update. So this is using terminal services or some remote access system, and so your bequest person is simply updating Donman directly. Now, we also have what's called the Bequest on the Road system. Now, this is an optional system that you can buy, And if you're interested in it, you can contact me or Val, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But what it enables you to do, if you don't have internet or easy access, is make a complete copy of the entire Donman system onto a laptop. Now, you can't actually make changes to donor records there. What you can do is create special extra notes, which you can then export and email the head office for loading onto the live system. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you that note system. So if I run the Bequest on the Road system, you'll see that it says the donor management offsite module is activated.
Andrew?
Yes?
Just a couple of people are having a bit of a delay in seeing your screen, so if you can just
okay.
make sure it's rendered. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. So basically, we look at our donor screen. Now, this is what the Bequest person on the road would see, the same as you or I would see on the donor screen. The difference is that if they go to the notepad for a particular donor, and let's say this is the person that you've just visited, the Bequest prospect, I click on the notepad icon, and everything looks the same, except down the bottom there are two new pads, offsite and admin. So I click on the offsite. Anything I type in there, can then be exported with the program and sent to head office, and someone in head office can run the equivalent import program, and they'll be updated onto the real notepad in head office. Now, if there's some information you want to send to them, under admin you can say, please change the name to Ms. Change title to Ms. Hillary. So basically that admin note will be printed on a report when they do the import, and will let them know that something needs to be done to the donor file. So that's just a quick overview of the Bequest on the Road, and as I say, if you're interested in that, contact me or Val with more information on that. So that's my little bit of this, and I'm now going to pass it over to Murray, who will take up the trust system.
Hi, I'm now going to go through a little bit more on the trust system, just what it can do and how you can make use of that. Now, the idea of the trust system is it can make use, it allows you to record information about the trusts and foundations that you deal with. Now, that may not be people that have given you money at this stage, and in fact, typically you would probably put in a list of potential trusts that you think might be able to, you might be able to get some money from in the future. Like Andrew says, with the trust, you need to, first of all, have the donor record there on the system. So you have to create, sorry, we're dealing with a bit of volume trouble here. You have to create a donor record first. Now, the idea is the easiest way to create the trust data is actually via the donor entry screen. So if we go into donor entry, here we have our typical donor screen, and I'm just bringing up our first person here, Mr. John B. Good. Now, it's up to you. Again, like with Andrew, as you said, you could have a separate donor type for his request, which is not really a good idea. However, when you're dealing with trusts and foundations, it makes sense to actually have a donor type of trust or trust and foundation. So you can see here for Mr. John B. Good or off-the-wall promotions, it's actually being listed as a trust, and that's quite useful for other things as well. Now, you'll see down here we have a trust button. So that's what we're going to do. We're going
Andrew and Murray, we've lost sound from you. Somehow you've muted yourself, I think. Hello?
Hello?
Okay, we've got you back. Thank you.
How much did you lose?
Probably 30, 40 seconds.
Okay. All right, I'll just step back a little bit. So we're on the donor screen here, and we now go to the trust button. And you'll notice that a lot of the information on the trust screen is actually information that's stored on the donor record, not the trust record. So things like the name and address details, phone numbers, that's all from the donor record itself. So looking at the actual data that's from the trust record, we can start off with this trust manager field here. Now, not every trust has a trust manager, but there are times where it might be a small trust and they're not big enough or not wealthy enough to actually have their own organisation, so they actually have a different company manage it for them. So here we can see that the trust manager is A&T, or it might be perpetual trustees or something like that. Often it might be when somebody dies, they give or they set up a trust. So there's not really enough to warrant having people administrate it for them or as part of their organisation, so they get a trust manager to do that. And a little bit later on we'll see where we can actually set up those trust manager codes. The next field that we see is the state code. So if you're an organisation that works across Australia, but the trust itself only deals in a particular state, then you can set up a state code there to indicate which particular state that they operate in. So that if you're trying then to come up with a list of people that you can apply to for money for use in Victoria, then you can just make sure that you only pick those applicable states. Now the next field here is discretionary. Discretionary, yes, means that it's up to the organisation whether they wish to actually give you money or not. But there may be times, for instance, where somebody leaves a bequest to you, but it's set up as a trust, and all you need to do then is apply every year for a certain amount of money. Under those conditions, it's non-discretionary. They have to give you the money, but you probably still have to apply to them. When we enter on that, we come down to these interests. Now you'll see here that we have up to 8 different fields here, a little bit like extra codes where you can create interests. Now these interest codes that you create obviously are things that are of interest to that organisation, to the trust, but is also of interest to you themselves. Because there's no point if an organisation, if a trust has particular interests that don't overlap with the sort of things you do, there's no point recording that information on the system. As we enter through there, we come down, we go to the application times. Now, you may have up to 4 application dates in the year that you can apply to them. So they might say, in this case, yeah, you can apply on the 1st of March. So the month is 3, the day is 1. They might also receive applications on the 1st of June and also the 1st of September. And when it comes time to run the diary report, when you're interested in making an application and you want to know who you can apply to for money, then it's quite possible that you can actually say which particular dates. Okay, so having entered through those fields, we come down to the comments, which is just a fairly basic comment field. You can put anything you like there. And when we press enter on the comment field, we now get a pop-up screen. So you can see up the top there, we can see what the range of disbursements or what we can apply to them for. So in this case, we can apply to an amount between $1,000 and $100,000. So if you're looking to apply for $500,000, then it's not worthwhile applying to them unless you actually cut down how much you want to apply for. There are also 8 fields here where you can actually select options of things that they don't give money to. So in this case, you can see this organisation, this trust, will not give money for payroll and for general expenses, as you can see in this code description down here. So if you're trying to raise some money for payroll, this organisation will not give that money to you. So we don't actually want to see that when we ask for a list of people that we can apply to. And just for your interest, under here, we've got the total amount of money that they give each year. In this case, it's $1 million. So having got that information, if we were just entering that now, we could press enter, it would give us a blank screen, which means that we've actually saved that information away. Now, having got a certain number of these records set up, what you need to do then is say, okay, I have a project that I want to raise some money for, who can I apply to money for? Now, we would normally do this via the diary report. Now, Andrew's already shown you the diary report from the request point of view. I'm now going to show it to you from the trust point of view. So I'm just going to escape back to our main menu. Now, Andrew was looking in the bequest system. I'm going to now go to trusts. There's not a lot in here. You can see where we set up the codes, and we can have a look at that a little bit later. I'm going to go to the diary report. Now, Andrew was choosing bequest prospects. I'll be choosing report on trusts. And when I hit enter a couple of times, I now get a different set of criteria that I can choose which particular trust that I want to apply to. Now, the very first question is a very important one, because for a lot of trusts, you don't necessarily have all the information. You may not have dates in the year that you can apply to them, or you may not have the range of disbursements that you can apply for. So the first question is basically saying, well, if you don't have the information for particular bequests of particular trusts, should you still include them in the list that comes up? And so normally you would say, yes, I do want to include those anyway. All right. So now we can look at months that we can apply to them. So if we say we want to make an application within the first 6 months of this year, I can say I want to apply between month 1 and month 6, and I normally wouldn't bother about the days. Do I care whether it's the discretionary amount or the non-discretionary, or in this case, I'm just going to go with both. Do I want to select by trust manager? Do I want to select by code? No. Do I want to select by trust interest? Well, normally you have a particular project in mind that would have a certain interest, and you only want to be able to pick trusts that have a similar interest to whatever it is the project you're running is. So in this case, I'm going to say yes, I want to select by trust interest, and I'm going to pick child care. Now, it's automatically typed the rest of it when I've typed in C, because that was the first one under C that I did. I could pick others as well, but let me say that I just want to do childcare. Do I want to exclude trust exclusion codes? Well, yes. If I want to say create a new building for a preschool or something like that, I don't want to ask trusts that don't give money for capital. So hopefully I've got a code here for capital. Doesn't look like I do. Well, I'll just exclude perhaps general exclusion codes or something like that. But typically a lot of trusts perhaps may not give for capital, so you'd have a code for capital. Do I care about the grant range? Well, you might when you're doing it. I'm going to leave it fairly open, otherwise you may not end up selecting anybody. We can look at how much their annual grants are. Now, at other times when we're not actually trying to look for people that we can potentially apply to, after we've applied for people, we can then pull up lists of people or trusts that we have applied to in the past. So we could put a date range and say, yeah, I want people that I've applied to in the last month or the last year or something like that. We can use their donor numbers in the donor number range. Now, a little bit later on, I will show you how we can actually set up a record to show when we've applied for money and how successful we were. If you are successful when you receive a grant, typically you'll need to reply to them at some stage to show how you spent the money, or you may even have an interim date that you can reply on. So you need often to say, okay, who do I need to reply on next month? So that will give you a month then to generate that report back to them to say, this is how we've spent your money. So that's what we can do with these last ones. We can look at when the final report or the interim report is due or when it's been sent. I'm going to ignore those for the moment. And like with Andrew, we can now choose what information we want. I'll say I want the full donor screens. I'll say we want the trust details and any applications that we've made to them. I'll start on a new page. We could, if we want, create a selection or we could use a selection file to print from that, or we can actually output to our own new selection file if we want. I'll just do this to the screen, and it's pick 7. So this is,
yeah.
Okay. Now, this one here is not the one that we were looking at earlier on. I think that will be a bit later on, but essentially you get all the basic information from the donor screen. You've got application details here, as in when you last applied, total disbursements, all the information about them as a trust, and then here are, or this is in this case, one application that we've made to them at some stage. So the report is very flexible. You can use it for picking people that you want to apply to or potentially may apply to, and you can use it for looking up applications and people that you need to send reports to. All right, so I'm going to get out of there now. Now there are a number of things here. We may as well, while we're in here, talk about the codes. So the trust manager codes, the application codes, the exclusion codes, and the state code. Now, the trust manager code, the application codes are all 8 characters. The exclusion codes and the state codes are 3 characters. And if you know how to set up a code, it's exactly the same as any other code that you set up on the system. Okay, so let's suppose we've now come up with a list of people that we want to apply to. We've looked through that. We've found that some of these we've applied to in the past and they've knocked us back every time. So we've picked the ones that we want to apply to. Once we've actually applied to 1 or 2 of these, then we need to create an application record for these people. So again, it's easiest to go in by the donor entry. We'll go to our person we were looking at before. Let's go to trusts. And down the bottom, we've got this trust application edit button. So if I click on that, when it comes up on your screens, you can say, okay, what date? So I'm going to say 2 for today. We applied today. The application we said was going to be for child care, and we're going to ask for $50,000. And I'll say it's for upgrading preschool buildings, something like that. Now at this stage, that's all we need to do. You would obviously create your documentation, you send it to them, and at some point in the future, you'll get a response. But for the moment, we're just going to save this as it is. If we had other applications to the same organisation, we could put those there, but we will escape out of there. Now, once they get that reply, we can update that application record in a couple of different ways. But the easiest way is simply to go on the dollar symbol, and we can go to the trust button. Okay, and then we click on trusts to actually see a list, in this case, of 4 applications that we've made to them in the past. Now, you can see here that we've made one yesterday, and we've got the one at the top there for today. If I double-click the one that we want, that will then bring up that same trust record on the screen, and I can now say, yes, they replied to us today. Well, I'll say they replied to us tomorrow, 2+1, and yes, we were successful. And they decided they were going to give us $45,000. And at the same time that they give you that information, they would typically tell you when they want to report back and whether they wanted perhaps a part-way report. So let's say they want an interim report, and that's going to be in 100 days' time, whatever that is. And then they want the final report due on the 1st of the 1st, 2015. So I can put that information in, and I can say that. And that now updates that record. So if I just go back to a different tab and go, hopefully we can see, yes, we were successful, $45,000. We need to report back to them next year and an interim report in 2014. So using that diary report, maybe in April we could say, give me a list of all people, all trusts that I need to reply to as an interim report, perhaps for the month of May. And then this one would come up and you could then begin to prepare your report for them so that you've got a month in, by the time you've got that month done, you should hopefully have got all of that updated. So that's pretty much the trust system. So in summary, it allows you to keep extra information about donors who are trusts. It allows you to select from those people, those trusts, who you can apply to for various things. You can record the application, and then you can actually get a list of those people that you need to apply to. So at this stage, I'll hand back to Marla. Well, I guess to Marla or to Andrew, depending on who is actually going to be doing the other. Oh, Andrew's actually just told me I probably should show you the trust report. If I go back into the trust system, the trust report basically shows you some general information about the trust. Normally you would probably do that based on a selection file that you've created. I did create one. It's just got donor number 1, 2 and 3 in it. I'll just say show me the last 4 submissions, and when I do a print preview on that, it just shows basic information. Here's the name of the organisation, here's the history, and some details about the actual applications. Notepads, which we could have got from the diary, and there's probably going to be a lot of that. A lot. And then we're on now to our second person. So that's the diary report. Okay, sorry, that's the trust report. So I'll now hand back, I guess, to Marla. If Marla would like to take control now, I guess we should find out which PC we're going to be answering questions on.
Yeah, I'll just take back the controls for the moment.
Okay.
So if that concludes the main presentation, we will just remind everyone if they do have any questions, they can log them in the questions pane now. We haven't had any questions yet, so we'll just give everybody a moment to catch up on that. And while we're waiting for that, I'll just let everybody know that our webcasts are monthly, and we've now moved them to a Tuesday for the next few months. We'll see how we go on a Tuesday, and hopefully that fits in with everyone. So the next one is scheduled for the Tuesday the 18th of February at 2 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time. So pop that in your diary, and further details will be on email and sent out to you shortly. So it looks like maybe you've answered all the questions, you've covered everything that people want to hear about, Andrew and Murray. Complete lack of any questions being asked.
No. Maybe everyone's logged out.
No, everybody's here. What we can do, if you do have any questions after today, you can contact us offline via the website, or go to or email info_donman@advsol.com. I'll get started. There's one question that's come through from Kavita. The comment section on the trust area is quite short, so it does not really allow for larger pieces of information. For instance, more details about funds. Where would you put this information?
Normally you would probably just put that into the notepad. Same thing with applications themselves. When you make an application, obviously there's not a lot of detail that you can put in there, but you could either put...
Murray, did you want to show that?
Oh, okay. Okay, so if we go back to, say, trust. So, as you were saying, the comments area is not particularly large. You do have the notes button here, which gives you access to the same set of notes that you would normally have from the donor screen. So you can just put a note in here, anything that you want about it. You could set up one of these notepads like pad 3. You could actually say trust if you wanted to dedicate a whole pad to the trust. Now, also, when you make an application, most of the detail is going to be in probably a Word document or some sort of external document that you would then be sending to the actual trust themselves. But by using a link, and you've got the insert link button at the bottom, you can put a link in the notepad to any documentation that you have for that particular application. Now that's just a standard feature of trust. It's not peculiar, sorry, that's a standard feature of notes. It's not peculiar to trust, but it is a good way of actually tying in all those particular documents together within the Donman system.
Marla, are there more questions?
Yes, okay. There's one from Melissa. Is there any function that reminds you when a trust application date is coming up?
No, not at this stage. You can put something in the donor management diary in order to do the same sort of thing, although it's just as easy to do a similar sort of thing into Outlook. But the thing is, of course, you don't want to just necessarily put it in and say, oh, I must apply then, because it may not suit whatever it is you're applying for.
Okay, another question, and this is from Laura, and she's asking, can you track the expenses for trusts, like against each successful trust?
Well, Donman's not an accounting system, so typically your accounting system would track those sorts of costs and how it's spent. I mean, if you really wanted to use Donman, you could perhaps set up a campaign specifically for that money that came in and then put some sort of cost against it. But it's not really the ideal way to do it. Hopefully your accounting system would have all the incomings and outgoings for that particular project, so that would really be the best place to store that. But you could still make a note of some of those sorts of things, either in campaign notes or in the notes, you know, just the typical donor notepads.
But yes, Murray's right. You could create a campaign with the same name as the trust, and then do a pre-bank for whatever the trust money. Oh no, the trust money there. Actually, when the trust money came in, you might credit that to that campaign, and then you could create cost codes against the campaign. So yes, you could do that.
Okay, that looks like all the questions we've got
I've
today.
got a Dorothy Dix question from Murray, because I'm surprised that nobody asked this question. So my question, Murray, is where do you get all the information about trusts that are on the screen that go into the trust system?
Well, there used to be great big fat books that you would get that used to list all the various trusts and foundations that you could apply to. But Andrew knows full well, because he asked me yesterday, and that's not really available as best as we know. There are online sites that you can go to. We found
Philanthropy Australia seems to be the only source of an extensive overview of trust in Australia. You actually have to join and be a member to get access to the content, but they have all that information online.
Anne has just contributed to the conversation there and has suggested Philanthropy Australia as well, so thank you, Anne. Sorry, go on.
Join. It's about $100 per year to join from what we can see.
I've been telling people for years that this is all based on the philanthropy book, and I only realised yesterday that the philanthropy book doesn't exist anymore.
A couple more questions have just come through, and as we've got time, we'll just quickly run through them. From Kavitha, can you run reports for words in the notepad? I guess search for words is meaning.
I don't know.
So just looking for particular words within one of the notepads.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll go with that unless she advises otherwise.
If you were looking for a single word, you could use Visual Reporter to find a single word. If you were looking for a phrase, one of the difficulties is the way that the notepad is split up into multiple records. It's quite possible that your phrase might be split between several records, and therefore you may not necessarily find the phrase that you're after, even though it actually exists within a particular donor record. One of the other ways around it, it's a bit messy, is you can export that information, the notepad information, into a word merge data file that you could put into, well, you could open a notepad and do a search. It's not really the same sort of thing, and it's a little bit messy to do searches like that. So yes and no, it can be done to some extent, but not perhaps easily.
And my advice is, if you are planning on doing searches within Word and using notes for that sort of functionality, to use words that are fairly unique that you can search by. So for example, if I had, every time I created a note about housing, I made it housing with a colon on the end, then I could probably search for that word and effectively find it. But looking for the word "the" would be useless.
Okay, thanks for that. A couple more questions. Laura said they have a trust as an organisation. Can they just change the code to the to trusts? I think it's following on from an earlier question.
I'm not quite sure which code they're talking about, but presumably they're talking about the donor type. Yeah, you can change the donor type of any record at any time. So if you haven't already got a donor type of trust, you can set one up and then you can change any record that you want to be a donor type of trust.
Okay. And Glenn's question is there an easy way to migrate trust data from a regular record to the trusts section?
Well, a regular you need the regular record anyway, so I'm not quite sure what information you would actually take from the regular record to put into the trust record itself, because the regular record doesn't have specific fields for trust information, so we would probably need to find out what information he was trying to move across and where it was actually stored.
Look, I think to clarify it may be that when we've shown the bequest and the trust system, you've seen the name and address on the screen and thought maybe that needs to be imported. The name and the address that appears on the bequest and the trust screen is just the name and address from the donor record. It doesn't have to be imported. It's simply showing you the name and the address from the donor record. There is nothing to be imported.
If I go to a donor that's not trust,
Glenn said you've answered the question, so it was about changing the donor type, so thank you for that. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay, and one more question from Melissa. Can you export the trust report to Excel? When she selects print to file, nothing is happening.
Well, I mean, you could, but it's not designed in such a way that it would import well into Excel. Excel is great where you have one line of information per trust in this case, whereas what we're producing is we're producing many, many lines, almost a page for each trust, and across the page you've got multiple fields and stuff like that. So while you could put it into Excel, it wouldn't be of any value in Excel as such. However, if you wanted to, you could create a visual reporter report, and you could pick particular records. You know, you could select which particular records you wanted based on certain criteria, and then you could choose what bits of information you would like to output. So not from the actual trust record itself, but using Visual Report Writer, we could definitely create a report that would be easily imported into Excel.
Okie doke. That seems to be all the questions, and that's just about on time, so we'll draw it to a close there. So thank you, Andrew and Murray. Very popular topic today and well attended, so thank you for presenting on Trusts and Bequests. As I mentioned earlier, our next webcast is Tuesday the 18th of February, and details will be on email to you shortly. And of course, if you are interested in viewing some of our previous webcasts, you can go to the website at donman.net.au and then go to What's New, and you'll find recordings of all of our previous webcasts there. So you can view them at any time you like. And if you do have any further questions today, you can email us at info_donman@advsol.com or give us a call. And if we've missed any questions today, they are logged and we'll follow up with you offline. So that concludes our webcast for today. Thank you all for joining us, and goodbye.